say this, we forget. That's it. Yeah, cool. Thank you. I'll look after you. We can't retrieve any situation. It's out of here. We've always done it. I've done 400 years, so I'll look after you. Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flying Officer Rebecca Walmsley. We are honoured to acknowledge Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfeld and Mrs. Lou Hupfeld, distinguished international guests and members of the Australian Armed Forces, and Vice Admiral Jeffrey Trussler, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Warfare, United States Navy, and the accompanying delegations. We also warmly welcome Squadron Leader Mac Cottrell, representing the Air Force Association. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the hearts of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Oscar Skelton Furniss. Oscar Furniss was born on the 12th of July 1921 in Auburn, New South Wales, to Oscar and Bertha Furniss. 2 years after birth, his family moved to the village of Wentworth Falls in the Blue Mountains. Growing up, Oscar had 2 brothers, Frank and Anthony, and 2 sisters, Muriel and Anne. Their father was a real estate agent. Fond of tennis and golf and a keen table tennis player, Oscar also enjoyed building model aircraft with brother Frank. He attended Wentworth Falls Primary School and Katoomba Intermediate High School. He received his intermediate certificate in 1936 with a first-class pass in maths. The following year, he worked as a jackaroo on various farms throughout New South Wales. In 1939, Furniss began a diploma in agriculture at Hawkesbury Agricultural College. He passed his final exams at the end of 1941, but almost immediately applied for entry into the Air Force Reserves. 6 months later, on completing his basic training, he was accepted into the Royal Australian Air Force, aged 21. Having begun training as a navigator, he embarked for overseas service from Melbourne on the 2nd of November 1942 and arrived in Canada later that month. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 20,000 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operators, gunners and engineers who joined Australian and British squadrons in Britain throughout the course of the war. Furniss spent months training in Canada and in April 1943 was made sergeant. He left for the United Kingdom in May, arriving the following month. Further specialist training followed in England, and in November he was promoted to flight sergeant. On the 10th of April 1944, he was posted to No. 467 Bomber Squadron. As part of Bomber Command, the squadron flew the 4-engined Avro Lancaster heavy bomber. Furniss was the navigator with the crew of an aircraft known as Naughty Nan. After some technical issues in their early missions, the crew comprised a satirical poem about their aircraft, which I will read to you now. We are the crew of the Naughty Nan, and though we do the best we can, we always seem in trouble's way, with gremlins at their wicked play. The engines stop, electrics fail, we do much better with a sail. The turrets always seem to tire of going round and never fire. So it's out to the wash to drop the load, to scare the fish in their abode. Another target failed to prang, another bloody boomerang. On the 3rd of May, shortly before 10 p.m, the crew of Naughty Nan took for an attack on the village of Maley Camp. It was believed a German panzer division was encamped there on their way to the coast. The night was well lit, and the Luftwaffe shot down 42 bombers, including Naughty Nan, which was on its way home when it was attacked by an enemy fighter. The aircraft caught fire and the pilot instructed the crew to bail out. Flight Sergeant Stanley Jolly and Robert Hunter managed to do so safely. The plane crashed near the village of Drew St. Marie. Those killed in the crash with Flight Sergeant Furniss were Australians, Pilot Officer Colin Dixon and Flight Sergeant Hilton Forden, and British Sergeants Philip Weaver and Horace Skelhorn. Flight Sergeant Jolly was helped by a local onto a train and made it back to England, while Flight Sergeant Hunter was cared for by members of the resistance before being taken to hospital with extensive burns. When the Americans liberated the area, he was returned to the United Kingdom. 5 bodies recovered from the wreckage were interred in communal graves at the Drew St. Marie Cemetery and the St. Remy Communal Cemetery. While the graves were later located, the remains of Furniss, Dixon and Weaver could not be identified and were reinterred together at the Turlington British Cemetery on the French coast near Calais. Furniss's remains lie there today under the inscription, "Till we meet again, loved son of Owen B. Furniss, New South Wales, Australia." He was 22 years old. Oscar Furniss was dearly missed by his friends and family. His mother was said to carry the sense of his loss for the rest of her life and made the trip to visit his grave in France. The Oscar Skelton Furniss Memorial Prize was awarded to the student at Hawkesbury Agricultural College who wrote the best essay in 1953. Flight Sergeant Oscar Furniss's name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, along with almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Oscar Skelton Furniss, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.